Welcome. Glad to have each and every one of you here. It's 5 o'clock, and we are here tonight to achieve what I believe is a very important event for our city, and especially for our schools and for the people that we all serve and care a lot about. It's good to have staff here and citizens here. As all of you know, the city allows you to come here, but also to stay at home and be on Zoom. So we welcome those that are on Zoom and appreciate them. As we always do, we ask that you make sure that your phones are turned off, devices of all kinds turned off, and we would appreciate that. I am pleased to announce that the City Council is all here and accounted for. I am also pleased to indicate that we have a number of staff that are here. The city manager is here, assistant city manager is here, our city attorney is here, our city clerk is here, and assorted staff are back there. The chief is here. We have a captain here, a number of different folks that are here. As well, we have the school board here, and that's why it's such an important time. We last met in November of 22 about this very thing, and I'm happy to say that both teams have worked extremely hard to get us to this point, and I'm hopeful that by 6 o'clock we can have a agreement done and be on our way. Was that a not so subtle hint that we need to be done by 6? Okay, well, let's just shoot for that, okay? And, that'll be great. President Clifford, would you introduce your team, please?
Mr. Mayor, thank you. This is the opening of the Glendora Unified School Board of Education meeting. All school board members are present. It's wonderful to see your faces in the audience. I feel like what is old is new today for some reason. In any event, I would like to start to my left with Dr. Dominic DeGrazia and let the staff introduce themselves to the community if they would.
Dr. Dominic DeGrazia, Superintendent.
Jeanette Walzak, Assistant Superintendent of Business Services.
Dr. Jennifer Prince, Assistant Superintendent of Educational Services.
Eric Osborne, Assistant Superintendent of Personnel Services.
And the very last one?
Mrs. Tracy Cornelius, Executive Assistant to the Superintendent.
The most important person there in the room. Again, all the school board trustees are present and accounted for, so I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, sir. And with that, for those that could stand, I would invite you to stand, and Michael is going to lead us in our pledge. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Michael, thank you for that. As all of you know, we are here tonight to discuss and hopefully approve a master joint use agreement. In other words, an MOU that will allow the city and the schools to work closer as a team and leverage some of the funds that we have and do some things that are a win-win for all of us. With that, though, we first want to open up and allow the public to share whatever their thoughts are. I need to make sure that those of you who want to speak will fill out a yellow card. If you don't have one of these, or if you didn't pick one up on, coming in, they're back there. The city clerk is back there. You can get one. And there is a time frame that you're allowed to speak within. If you're on Zoom, once we wrap up here, we will ask if those that are on Zoom want to speak. Please use the raised hand, and we will make sure that you are called on. One last thing, you're only allowed to speak on this specific topic, okay? This is not a time where you can talk about world peace and anything else, but you need to talk about this. So With that, I will open our public comment period, and I have a comment card. Mr. Gene Lopez. Gene, if you would come up, and there's a microphone right to your right, and we welcome you, and feel free to give us your thoughts. Yes. Okay. Well, please attempt to do that.
Right.
Thank you.
So good evening. My name is Gene Lopez. I'm a parent of a student at Glendora High School and one who just graduated. And I'd like to speak briefly on, I'm also a member of the Community Committee on Ethnic Studies, for those of you who don't know that. And so I'd like to acknowledge Dr. Prince and her efforts in bringing the community committee together via email earlier this month and describing some of the points that have taken place, or some of the measures that have taken place in introducing ethnic study instructors and a committee of students. And I applaud her for that. Thank you for bringing us up to date. And I encourage that those committees, the teacher committee or instructor committee and the student committee, begin to show us some drafts on some of the work that they are completing before we get too much further into this semester. It'd be nice to see some of the work that they're doing. The other thing is, and this has to go back to about late October, November, regarding our track and field at Glendora High School, and how we can have that conversation with the city of Glendora to encourage the city to take some movement in creating a bond or some types of measures so that we can have our track and field at Glendora High School improved. And so I encourage our board, trustees, and our council members on March the 5th to go to Bonita High School and take a look at that track. Take a look at the facilities for the track and field and compare that to what we have here in Glendora. If you haven't seen Bonita High School's track and field and you have seen ours, you're going to be shocked that what we have, not only as a practice facility, and compare that to some of the other schools. And at the same time, committee members, and this, I say this in jest, but I encourage you to go stand on a city corner and watch the traffic signals and how they operate. They aren't operating at a very efficient rate. And so I encourage the city council, go take a look at that. March 5th, go to Bonita High School. Any other day of the week, go to local city corner, Glendora or Grand and Foothill. See how those lights work. Thank you.
Thank you, Gene. I don't have any other cards from anybody here that wants to speak. Is there anybody who wants to speak but hasn't filled out a card yet? If you do, please let us know, and we'd be more than happy to welcome you. Okay, seeing none, Madam Clerk, is there anybody on Zoom that desires to speak?
There's anybody on Zoom at this point that would like, yes, we have one raised hand.
Okay, I've been told that there's a delay, just a little bit, could be in the sound. So, Madam Clerk, go ahead and initiate that, and we'll listen as we can.
Okay, are we functional here? Hello?
Yes, Steve.
Okay, hi. I'm Steve Slakey. I read over the whole document, and I'm happy to see that the city and the school district are kind of consolidating the agreements that they've made over the years. I have two questions. On page 15, there's a reference to the various school sites, including Williams School. And those of us who live in this area have been concerned that the fence that was put up by the previous school administration makes the place frankly look like a prison camp. And so I'm hoping that when the rest of the main buildings are fenced in, that fence on Lorraine will be moved back to the where the buildings are, so it looks a little more open. And I was also curious about a timeline in terms of when that work might be done. And then the other question is kind of interested in, I know that the open space element in the city plan, general plan, includes school sites or the playgrounds. And I'm wondering if that is relevant here. Is that still the case that the city includes those spaces in the open space element? So those are my only questions. I think this is a great idea. I'm happy to see the city and the school district dealing with this.
All right, thank you, Steve. Anything else?
Nope, that's it.
Okay. As is the practice that we have, we will answer the questions that you just raised in a moment, but wanted to see if there's anybody else on Zoom that would like to speak. If there is, please raise your hand and the city clerk will see that.
Have no one else requesting to speak.
Okay, then I will close our public comment period and bring it back to the dais. Regarding questions that Steve raised, I think it would be best if either Adam or would Dominic like to opine on a brief answer to those two?
The mayor, it may be perhaps we walk through the presentation and answer some of those questions along the
Would be
way,
great,
if,
too.
if that's
So-
okay with you. And
So
is
if you want to wait until then that would be fine, but,
that okay with you, Dominic?
That works.
Perfect.
Thank you.
okay. All right, then we will do that. Okay, as I said, we met in November of 22 about this. It was a very good time, a fruitful time, and now we're back with the hoped for goal to approve this. And this is a very historic time, and I think it's going to be a win-win for everybody. So we will now bring it back and consider the use or the proposed MOU, or the Master Joint Use Agreement between the city and the district. And with that, I am going to ask our Assistant City Manager to go ahead and start us out. Mr. Lopez, it's yours.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor, City Council. Good evening, Mr. President, members of the board. Very pleased to be here. The item before you this evening is in fact what the mayor just mentioned, the proposed master joint use agreement between the city and the district. I think it builds clearly on the framework that was discussed in November of 2022. A lot of work has gone on between then and now. Took us a little longer to get back to you. We were hoping to get back to you within the year, but a few months behind schedule then. But we've been very committed to diligently get back to the council and school board as quickly as possible so that we can make progress on this particular project. So before I get into the specifics of the new agreement or the proposed agreement before, I think it's important that we talk about and acknowledge the many agreements that the city and district have entered into over the last 6 decades. In fact, we've entered into 9 separate agreements that deal primarily with the joint use of sports fields and facilities of the library. So I'll run through a little bit of the history there. The school resource officer program and our crossing guard program covers a range of issues. Sometimes we've had agreements, several agreements dealing with the same subject, just updating it for the times at that particular time and place. But for the most part, a lot of the framework that was presented in November in 2022 builds on that longstanding relationship between our 2 agencies. And so a lot of work has been put in by several generations to get to where we're at now. I'd also point out that it doesn't really capture the daily interaction that happens between district staff and city staff. On occasion, things pop up and we have to work to troubleshoot whatever issues pop up, whether it's related to the issues that we're going to be talking about tonight, or something else that pops up in the course of business. So long history between us, and starts dating back to 1962. This is the oldest agreement that I could find in our records. And it was explicitly entered for the purpose of sponsoring and promoting community recreation programs and activities. It was a very broad agreement. It gave the city access to virtually every facility that the district controlled, but it reflected the multitude of programs that were in place at that particular time. It was about community. It was about community activities and recreation in particular. And I'd highlight the last bullet point on the screen. Even back then in 1962, recognizing the importance of these fields and facilities and the need to maintain them in safe operational manner for everybody. It contemplated and in fact allowed the city to charge an admissions fee or maintenance fee for use of those facilities so that we could offset the ongoing maintenance and operation and keep up the investments that have been made by the community over the years. I'm not going to go in chronological order. I'm going to try to do it by issue subject. So if I jump back and forth, please excuse me. But fast forward all the way to 2001, we worked on an agreement for the aquatic center. The city contributed to its construction, which in turn made it available to the public for a set number of hours each and every year. That primarily manifests through our swim program in the summer, when city staff and through our recreation programs kind of help operate it in partnership with the school district. The city and district continue to work together on the aquatic center. In fact, we're in the midst of a rehabilitation of that particular facility, and we're looking forward to its completion in the not too distant future. So very happy to see that facility be renovated for future generations. The multi-purpose event center also entered into an agreement that particular year, primarily serves purposes related to the high school and the district, but it is available for the city and community use. All of the components of the city and district relationship, this is probably the facility that's used the least. And there is an established protocol between the city and district to help preserve that facility with whomever needs it in our community paying the actual cost of actually operating it. But we know it's very much used, so city and community don't take advantage of that facility as much as I think was originally contemplated. Moving forward to 2013, again, the dynamic nature of the city and district relationship and the overlap that existed between both of our agencies. There was an attempt at that time to really comprehensively update all of the agreements that were in place at that time. This was really the first time that we tried to merge everything for the sake of clarity and ease of reading and acknowledging what each other's roles and responsibilities were. Frankly, it is very similar to what is being proposed now. A lot of shared contributions towards projects, a lot of shared maintenance responsibilities and obligations. And so in that spirit is what we're presenting for your consideration this evening. Separately, in 2013, the city entered into an agreement with the American Little League, and it's a unique partnership in that the city agreed with the American Little League to facilitate certain responsibilities that the league would take on as opposed to the city being responsible for it. And it's stipulated very clearly, and it actually is outlined specifically on the screen under the third bullet point there. Talked about road maintenance, it talked about sweeping parking lots, it talked about trash pickup, talked about water use. And despite working on an extension after its first 5-year term, a renewal did not proceed. One of the unique characteristics of that particular agreement is that it was specifically between the city and the American Little League. It did not actually include the district as part of that agreement. So the draft 2018 agreement that was going to be contemplated actually made it a tri-party agreement. So the city and district working alongside the American Little League. It also serves as a model for a component of what we're proposing for you this evening that I'll get into in a little bit more detail a little later in the presentation. Probably the most unique component of our shared history is relates to this building, actually, the library. In 1970, the city and district formed the Glendora Library Authority. It was a joint use authority, actually, to facilitate the construction of this facility. The venture was justified by anticipated growth, both in our community and in the school district. At that time, we estimated that 50% of the patrons in the library were actually students of the district. Enrollment at the district was expected to grow more than 21,000 students, to 21,000 students. And at that time, there were 9,175 students enrolled in the district. So clearly, things have changed a little bit for our community, but the result of that partnership is this very facility. It's a very direct manifestation of the partnership there. In turn, the library committed to provide access to books and study areas, but also what would have been, I'm sure, a very modern record collection, cassette collection, and typewriters for everybody to use. Along those same lines, in 2019, the city and district entered into agreement for the city to provide professional library services. This is to advise the school district on the selection and ordering of books, providing consulting services related to the library services and activities that are developed on campus. This is a very specific agreement. It is a very limited agreement. Per quarter, we're capped at about 3 hours of staff time to work alongside school district staff in this endeavor. Getting into some of the more meatier subject areas, the school resource officer program was formalized in 2006. At that particular time, the city agreed to provide one sworn officer to participate as part of this program, but in reality, that allocation has been 1.5 FTE in practicality. The SROs have been primarily focused at the high school and the middle schools dealing with issues that pop up, and again, it has a very direct and stipulated overview of what their areas of responsibilities are going to be. As part of that agreement, the school district agreed to reimburse the city 50% of the actual costs as are defined in that agreement for the services being provided. And I think it's fair to say that school district and the Glendora Police Department have a good working relationship that has continued well beyond the scope of the school resource officer program. But we work well to address the issues that pop up from time to time. The next component is our crossing guard program. This one has a pretty long history. Prior to 2011, the crossing guard that served the school district were actually part-time employees of the city. 14 of the 16 locations where crossing guard services were provided were actually within the boundaries of the Glendora Unified School District. 2 of those were within the boundaries of the Charter Oak Unified School District. Costs were shared. GUSD was responsible for approximately half of the 7 locations, and then the city covered the rest of the cost of that crossing guard program. In 2011, we contracted with a firm called All City Management Services. Based on an assessment of all the locations, we decided to drop the number of total locations where crossing guards were needed from 16 to 14. 12 of the 14 remain within the jurisdictional boundaries of the Glendora Unified School District. All City Management Services continues to provide the service for our community. We still have a similar cost-sharing agreement between the city and school district. Costs tend to fluctuate year over year just based on the number of hours of the locations where we deploy our crossing guards, and of course, increase in wages that have been implemented over the last couple of years. So that's kind of our history from a contractual perspective, if you will. So moving into why we're here. Now that you've got the historical context of our partnership, it'll be easier, I think, to talk about the terms of the proposed agreement before you this evening. As I mentioned earlier, it follows the framework that was presented to you in November of 2022. It will supersede and replace all of the other existing agreements so that we have a single, more simple, clear document for everybody to be able to read and follow moving forward. So there will be parameters set in place, but still give staff the flexibility to address issues, again, as issues arrive. And it will encompass all of the same areas that I've been talking about over the course of the last couple of slides. I'm not going to get into every single level of detail for all of the provisions in the agreement, but I do want to highlight some specific areas. One are capital projects. The city remains committed to work alongside district staff to find ways to pay for capital improvements. I think it's important that we do so on a project by project basis, make sure that we're paying our fair share for those facilities. But at the same time, I think it also gives us a very good platform to advocate on a joint basis to our representatives in Sacramento and Washington, D.C. whenever those funds are available. So improvements to the track, as was mentioned earlier, is a prime example of the type of project that we can work and advocate jointly to secure funding to facilitate that project sooner rather than later. Governance. This is a kind of a new component or a new element of the relationship. The city is proposing to take the lead on all things related to sports fields in particular. We want to review collaboratively with the school district all of the revenues and the expenditures that come in and all of the costs that are related to the implementation of this program. Effectively, I think the city will serve as the bookkeeper, and then we'll reconcile the numbers working with the school district. We're meeting on a monthly or quarterly basis as we already do. Third element that I want to highlight is the common fee. Simply is a continuance of a decades-long discussion to help offset ongoing maintenance costs. We do intend to look at what the going rate is in our surrounding school district agencies as well as cities to make sure that we're not too far off from what the market is. We realize it's not intended to be punitive. It really is a reinvestment into the facilities that are being used by the city, by the number of organizations that currently operate sports fields or sports leagues in our community. The last element I want to highlight is the indemnification, not exactly the sexiest of topics, but it's important. In previous agreements, there were figures attached to those agreements where it literally said, you know, on the left side of a third base, that's district's responsibility. We'll take the right side of first base, and then we'll split the square footage of center field. The property lines themselves sometimes bypass or transect fields of play, and so if there is ever an injury in the middle of a soccer game or a baseball game, you know, depending on where the trip occurred or fall occurred, the liability could have been exposed to one agency or another. In this particular instance, it was critically important to us that we work together, continue working together, and mutually indemnify each other, regardless of what or where the property lines are, or where the sports fields are. And so there is a time of use component. So when the city is responsible for scheduling sports fields and facilities, the city would take a primary role, and vice versa when the school district is in session. So hopefully a little bit more simple in that regard. Detailing specifically for sports fields and facilities, the city will assume coordinating responsibility. Effectively think of us as your booking agent, or a municipal version of StubHub. So all of the athletic leagues, all the sports leagues will actually work with our staff to help schedule their activities to make sure that there's enough time for their regular practices, their seasons. It is not intended, the city is not going to butt in and take in additional time. We just want to help coordinate that more effectively. Having one person kind of manage that, one agency, I think simplifies that process a little bit better. We are also committed to continue contributing to maintenance in a manner that's proportional to our use. We intend to track all of the costs related to the maintenance. So there's specific provisions in the document about the installation of water meters in our sports fields so that we have a much better accurate reading of how much water is actually used to maintain the fields. And then we are also proposing, as part of a 2-year pilot program, that the city will assume maintenance responsibilities of those fields. So we have a third-party contractor with whom we work. We envision kind of expanding that with the school district's help, and then figuring out if it works and is in the best interest of both of our organizations. Again, why are we doing all of this? We really need to best understand what the actual cost of maintenance are, to be fully transparent with our community about what that actually means. We've never been at a place where we can actually capture those costs, so this is kind of our first real deliberate effort to get to that place. school resource officer program, we will be contractually increasing the number of FTEs that we allocate to this program based on our service priorities. Our goal is to make sure that we provide as much coverage as possible. And I know the chief and superintendent have had good discussions about what that means from a practical perspective. The reimbursement of actual costs, as defined again, would start at 50% and increase to 75% over the next 5 years. So in 5% increments year over year. As is the case for any standalone needs, the district and city will continue working on making sure that we provide adequate public safety services to whatever event is going on. And we've also included language for any future expansion of the SRO program to kind of detail and again, be fully transparent about what that actually means from an operational perspective and a financial perspective for both the city and the district. Moving on to the crossing guard programs, we are going to continue the crossing guard program at their current locations. There is specific language there again for the city and district staff to get together to talk about what are the most optimal locations. So it doesn't mean that we're stuck at these intersections all of the time, but we remain committed to providing that service. Again, very collaborative in its intent, and the program costs would be shared equally. Library services will continue providing library supportive services similar to the agreement that's in place. So that one's pretty straightforward there. So what's next? What's going to happen next? With approval of the agreement this evening, that means city staff and district staff are actually going to get together quickly to begin implementing the common fee. And as I shared with you, we've done a little bit of comparative analysis. School district is actually a little ahead of the city in detailing what the fees are for its own operation, but also for the operations of several school districts in the San Gabriel Valley region. We want to look at what other agencies are doing to make sure that we're consistent with what the market is currently requiring. We want to have, if you remember back in November of 2022, we committed to having a very specific conversation with all of the sports leagues. We felt it was important that we would get to this particular milestone so that we have a framework, so that we have an agreement within which we can work to have a very detailed conversation with the sports league. So that'll be part of the process as we develop the common fee, again, to be fully transparent with all of them. It has taken us a little bit longer to get back to the sports leagues than I think anyone would have liked, but we remain committed to that. And it's also one of the reasons why, with approval of the agreement tonight, it actually doesn't become effective until July 1. So we have time to work on that specific component of the agreement. The last thing that I'll mention relative to this is once we arrive at a place where we have a common fee, it will still have to be approved by the city council and the board. So you will see that again before staff fully implements it. All right, so that gets us to the exciting part. So Mayor, Mr. President, it is my recommendation and staff recommendation that the City Council and Board of Education approve the master joint use agreement between our two agencies, that you authorize the city manager and superintendent to execute the agreement, including making non-substantive or minor changes, and that you direct staff to work to implement the master joint use agreement effective July 1, 2024. That concludes my presentation, Mayor. I'll turn it over to Superintendent DeGrazia or City Manager Raymond in case they have any.
Dominic?
I have an
Please.
initial comment. It's thank you to Moises Lopez for his great work on this document, many, many months, somewhat maybe even years related to this document. This is being formulated over really the last 20 years, and it's very comprehensive, and we're glad to see it. It is inclusive of so many different areas, especially in collaboration with Glendora Police Department, with the School Resource Officer Program in the city, and the slight increase there. It's a very important one for us. 0.5 to 0.6 may not sound like a lot, but to our students on Fridays and throughout other sites, it's a lot, and staff especially. In that support, it's quite a bit. In the crossing guard services, librarian services, we've been very fortunate and happy with. Thank you, Cindy and Janet, for your work with Glendora Public Library. We appreciate your support, and for the city's eagerness and wherewithal and thoughtfulness also to step forward and take over the scheduling of the sports fields and facilities after hours is very much appreciated as well. So those are some of my initial comments. And thank you again to Moises.
Adam?
Evening, everyone. Again, just a quick, as we talked about at the beginning, this is, this doesn't impact our day-to-day operations with the school district, and even outside of the bounds of doing this. And I think we all wish we had been here sooner than not, but it's just taken a long time to go through some of the points. But, the city's worked with the school district, whether it's helping clean floors or new scoreboards or bathrooms open during COVID to find a way for the sports leagues. We've always found a way to provide those services. So, even above and beyond the agreements that we have, we still have a robust relationship to do the best thing for the community. Your students, our residents, we share the responsibility. And so really appreciative actually of Dominic and his team for allowing us to sort of simplify the entirety of the agreement to make it easily understandable for the public. It has really gone a long way to help us get to where we're at. And so also, I know it sounds weird to say that we wouldn't indemnify each other, but I think we had an incident many years ago that we had to solve that related to exactly where a trip and fall happened, and that should never happen. We have sport leagues that also have insurance that we collect, and so it's really us working together in order to provide the best experience. So just a sincere thank you, and we look forward to answering any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. What I thought I would do is we would bounce back and forth. And so we'll start with Karen, Elizabeth, Gary, Robin, so be ready to go. And we'll end with Gary and I. And hopefully the wisdom that the 8 of you will show will leave virtually nothing for Gary and I to do except call for a motion. And wouldn't that be fun? Because you really don't want to hear us talk. So with that, I just want to say thank you to both teams. You guys have worked really, really hard. This is not an easy thing to do, but we thank you. We jointly thank you for that, and so we are here now. So thank you. With that, Karen, please, questions.
Yeah, I will save you, Mr. Mayor, and say that everything that needs to be said has already been said. And that I think Moises did a tremendous job. And I think we can leave it at that. This is a tremendous agreement and very happy to go forward with it.
All right, thank you. Elizabeth?
I am in complete agreement. I do have one tiny question, and it's not necessarily specific to this agreement, but Mr. Lopez did reference ongoing maintenance or capital maintenance projects. And so while we're talking about it, in the interest of informing our community, our greater community at large, can somebody from the district please provide an update on when the swimming pool work will begin?
Yep. Before Jeanette takes a shot at that question, I will also note that it's amazing to think that the Aquatic Center and Event Center, they are nearly a quarter of a century old. Although they look new, they have some definitely wear and tear from over the years. The decking on the pool is taken a beating over the years, as has the surface of the pool and many mechanical elements which need to be replaced at great cost in today's dollars. For an update on the timeline, I know there was a recent proposal that was sent out in regards to the pool work, and so Ms. Walzak will speak to that.
Thank you, Dr. DeGracia. Good evening, everyone. So last week, we sent out an RFP, basically the request for qualifications for architectural works. So we're hoping to bring that to our board by the February 12th meeting. And then from that point forward, we'll be able to have a clear and concise timeline of when the pool renovation will take place.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I sincerely appreciate the city's willingness to contribute to the refurbishment of this pool. It's going to be a hefty bill, so I do really want to thank you. And I also want to keep that timeline in mind as we figure out there's never going to be a great season to be able to have to take this pool offline for however long it's going to take. But I certainly want to keep our friends at the city and their programs in consideration when we're as we're moving forward as far as impact is concerned. So that's it. And I really do want to thank Mr. Lopez and our team over here, Mrs. Bakar, who is no longer with us, but those two really worked together to really bring this document home. And as it's been mentioned a few times, it's been a lot of work getting here. So I sincerely appreciate all your efforts. Thank you.
Thank you. Gary?
Well, we've been working on this for so long. I thought I had every question I ever would have answered. And then as Moises is talking, a couple things came up. So I do have a couple questions. Number one, who determines the locations of the crossing guards and the need for them? Is that something that's worked together between the district and the police department?
Yes.
Okay. Just a couple years ago, we had an incident where we made a change and the world was coming to an end. So I wasn't sure exactly how that happened. And then as we talk about the use of the sports fields, is there going to be a clean delineation between where the sports fields end and the playgrounds begin?
In terms of use of like school
Yeah,
district facilities?
as far as
Yes.
use of the fields?
Yes.
Okay, so that will happen. And then the last question I had, I don't know why I hadn't thought about this before, because so much of our sports activities on weekends, the weekend contacts for issues and emergencies and things, has that been worked out?
That is actually something that we have to work out. That's
Okay.
part of the implementation of it, but we will, as we typically do, have our community services staff available to respond to any that pop up, and we'll work closely with the school district.
Okay, appreciate it. Those are the questions I had. Again, this was brought to my attention when I very first got elected back in 2015, and it's been a conversation ever since. So looking forward to getting this completed. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you, Gary. Robin, please.
I really am just so pleased that this is going forth because I've been on the board for 8 years and we have been working on that. I remember the slip and fall and all the hand wringing and whose fault is this, who, anyway. So I'm very excited about this. My one question is, when will do we have a plan, a timeline for the installation of the meters, of the water meters and electricity meters?
That's actually something that we'll start working on fairly quick. I don't have an exact timeline to share with you at this moment, but that's something that we will work with our public works staff to get that scheduled, and we'll be sure to communicate that to everybody.
Okay, thank you very much.
Robin, thank you. Michael?
Thank you, Mendel. Moises, I know this is a labor of love for you, and it's been a lot of work, but you've done a super job, and there's still, I'm sure, quite a bit more to do. I have a few questions, and I'm gonna combine two questions kind of in one. On page 6, bullet point 6, under general provisions, the agreement shall be in effect for 2-year pilot period with the option to renew every 3 years thereafter. What happens if the two parties can't seem to get it? I mean, because it's taken us a long time to get to this point. What if that date goes past? What's going to happen? Is it going to you have a catch-all that will continue in force, or? And then I'm going to add this other question that I have on page 11 under 4, item 4, terms, which goes in part with the staff report, and then the agreement. The agreement shall continue in force and effective until terminated by either party. So that's in conflict with the staff report. So should that get interchanged with the staff report under the terms?
I'll take the first part of that question, and then we may need to make an edit to the agreement before we finalize it, just to make sure. Part of the reason that we're working on a 2-year timeframe to start off and then a subsequent 3-year timeframe is precisely to figure out the maintenance obligations and costs. This is a kind of a new element to the relationship between the city and school district. And so that's why we initially thought that a 2-year timeframe would work. If for whatever reason we get to a point where it's just not going to work, then I think we're going to go back to the drawing board. Obviously, we would have to come back to the council and to the board and notify all of you that we have come across a particular issue that we can't seem to overcome. I don't envision that that's going to be the case, but let's just say for argument's sake, it may happen. Then at that point, my recommendation to at least the city council and to the board would be to give us an additional time to see if we can work out through those issues. I don't have a crystal ball to figure out to get to that place, but as we this may also be news to everybody, but we may not get everything right the first time. So we need to give ourselves time to fix it and address it before it becomes a big.
So which statement is correct then?
That's the second part of your question.
Correct.
It should be 2 years with 3-year extensions. So we'll make sure that the second part of your question reconciles it with that initial time frame.
Okay, because otherwise it turns into an evergreen contract. Okay, page 6 under sports and fields, bullet point 4. The city, as part of a 2-year pilot program, will assume complete responsibility for the landscape and maintenance of the fields, which you had mentioned. What's the calculations for the reimbursement back to the city?
As we stipulate in the agreement, the city intends to contribute to the maintenance proportional to our use. And so we will figure out what that means in terms of time, space.
So at this point in time, we have no calculation in place.
No, not a specific.
That's going to be worked out prior to implementation.
That's correct.
That will come back to us for our approval.
Yes.
So, and that was another question I had of the balance owed back to the city. That's going to be part of that calculation you're going to work on. So also, the last question I have is maybe for both sides, for both the school district and us here, under the fiscal impact, there's nothing there. Do we have any idea what that's going to cost in staff time to maintain this and to implement this agreement for the 2 years or the 3 years or going forward?
At this point, we don't. Again, because the governance structure that we envision as part of this agreement is different than anything that we've done historically. We don't know what that fiscal impact, but we will account for it. We will come back to the council and to the board and kind of share what that actually means.
But there will be a fiscal impact to the city to implement this ongoing.
There is a cost to the provision of every service that we provide.
Thank you.
Michael, thank you. Paul?
Thank you very much, Moises, for this report. It's good for us to have joint use agreement in place because we have had the handshake deals for years. I remember when I was the athletic director calling John saying, hey, we need to get stuff, we need to move, we got to do this. And I think fiscal impact is true. This stuff is going to happen. Sprinklers break, stuff happens and it's got to be fixed. And the manpower that the city has is way beyond what the district can do. And so there is going to be impact. We're going to have to work on that. And I'm glad to see in there, it says, yes, we're still going to work on this until July 1. And then we're going to see that again before we start moving forward. This is awesome. I can't wait to go Saturday to see Louis Pompey. I'm sure that's phenomenal. And I think that's part of where I'm going with my comments is, and to Mr. Lopez's comments, the vision. Okay, what's the next vision for the cities and the schools together? Because I think we have a responsibility, and I will say residents, but I will always put the focus on children, on kids. And the fact that we have fields that are in bad shape in our district, that non-contact injuries happen with trip and falls, broken arms and things like that. It just happens because our fields are in poor repair. So looking forward to that next step, right? Let's get this in place. But then, for me, I'm looking at turfing the high school, turfing Goddard, turfing Sandburg. I'm thinking about the bigger vision of this picture comes into my mind. How do we light it, and how do we put things in place for our community moving forward, so that our community can use walking tracks, that we can have a place for community members to play and walk and run and do the things that they want to do in our proud city. And I don't think we've ever gotten to that point, but this is a great step. And I appreciate you taking it on with the district, but also it feels like as you read through it, it feels like the city is taking on the lion's share of the responsibility, which I think is good for us to start and to get going. So appreciate the work. I can't wait to see what gets worked out here in the next few months before we hit that July 1 date, and see what the fiscal responsibility is going to be for each side. And then once we get that started, in my mind, start thinking about how do we better our community as a whole, with all of our other facilities that are sitting in it's just space right now. And I think we could do a lot of great things for our community if we really look at it and come up with a big vision for where we move.
Thank you, Paul. Mayor Pro Tem, questions?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I have a couple, and indulge me, staff, I'm going to ask a couple that they answered for me yesterday. However, putting a public perspective on it, I think it needs to be heard. Thank you all for this agreement. It's neat being a newbie in the game here, fairly new. Been hearing about this, so this is a great successful day, I believe. A couple of questions come up, and seeing some of those faces in the room tonight in my growing with the community and watching sports leagues, I know that every league has its passionate players, its passionate owners, if you will, that are proud of the work they do on their fields. They're invested in those fields. So this is definitely a partnership, but I caution us that as we make deals with individual leagues, that we don't make a deal that becomes so complicated to manage as to who's talking to me, what's the deal, but to rather streamline those for simplicity's sake. Otherwise, we'll be back to where we were at those handshake deals, and nobody will remember. So just be careful of that, because the owners in the room of those leagues do, in fact, feel an ownership of it, and they're prideful of that, and that's a strong respect. We have some operational things to address, some signage updates and things, given the timing. My travels around, I've looked at, wow, I wonder how we are going to secure the upper fields, for example, at the middle schools that are so often used by the general public for walking and exercise during the day, because the kids are over there. So we need to learn how to do that and how we're going to present that to the public, because frankly, we're not all fans of fences and gates. So I understand there's a plan to address that, and I respect that. Public needs to be aware that there may be a gate they're not used to seeing in their time, and that's, again, protection of the students. Lastly, there was a reference on the list of schools, and I also brought this up, and I know the answer, but I'm going to ask it again. Williams School is a site that is excluded right now in the list of field use, and there's some discussion of fencing. So my question was, why was Williams excluded? And if say the answer, but I'd rather hear it from you as to why that one is different than one of the other elementary school sites in the community, and what that fencing containment might be entailing because of that difference.
I think we do have them included under letter I, attachment A, number 1 and 2, your comments, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, and the comments of the public commenter earlier today. There is some work we need to do with the fencing at Williams for sure, for aesthetic reasons. 2, there is some securing of the campus work we will need to do to open up the field space area. But we do plan to open the field space area for recreation, meaning t-ball, little league, soccer, as has been done in past years.
Would it also be safe to say that for general awareness, Williams includes a preschool facility that the other schools may not? So that might be its current enhanced security issue?
Yes, the number of programs are in place at Williams, including clinical services for occupational therapy of very young students, speech and language services as well, in addition to special education and regular education preschool classrooms. There are a number of programs on the campus.
So it is a little bit different, so it needs that different attention. But thank you for the work, and I'm in favor. Thank you.
David, thank you. Vice Chair, Monica. Questions?
Thank you all for all the work that you've put into creating this agreement. Mr. Friedendahl, you took some of my questions, so thank you. No, that's great. I did have a question, and I don't know if you can go into detail about this, but are there plans to have separate agreements with the little leagues, like the ones that were back in 2013, that are specific to like the National and American Little League?
So as we've written in the agreement, we basically give ourselves the authority, if you will, to enter into that type of agreement in lieu of implementing the common fee. So if a sports league wants to take more ownership over the fields that they typically use, then we're certainly willing to entertain that conversation as opposed to them paying the common fee.
And that will be something that you guys will do, the city meaning, sit down with those leagues and build that with us as well?
Yes.
Okay. So the district will be part of that conversation as
That's
well.
correct.
Okay. And then you mentioned something during your initial presentation, Moises, about the usage of the library. You said initially it was thought that 50% of the users would be students. Do you have the numbers as to what that current number is?
I'd have to pull up the agreement at that particular time. We have some historic documents that we could share with
Or
you.
what it is now, better said, than what it was in the past. It doesn't
I
really
don't know
matter,
if
but Cindy may know that.
Cindy or Janet may want to answer that question. How many of our users are students? Users at the library?
Okay, thank you. Another question that may be answered with the implementation portion of the contract, but if you have an answer to this, I would love to hear it. The hours for the SRO, in the wording in the contract, it says during school day. So does that mean they're there from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m., 8 a.m. to 5 p.m.? What does that look like as far as the hours for our SROs?
Yes and no to both your questions. Typically, they arrive before school begins and they stay for as long as needed after school. But oftentimes there are after-school events that are folded into that day, such as games or after-hour student activities, and we provide coverage in that. 1.6 is a kind of a strange number to land on, but the theory is one full-timer is 40 hours per week. One part-timer is 20, but we're going to push that 20 up to 30-ish and to provide both Friday coverage and middle school and elementary school coverage throughout the week as well.
But
I hope
does
that
that
helps.
guarantee that we have an SRO on campus during the school day at all times?
No, I cannot guarantee that. That SRO could be pulled away for another assignment because of an emergency. Right now, that SRO is on paid family leave, and so there is a vacant position. When the SRO is not at his or her post, we do have other police officers that are accessible, but not present on the campus in a same capacity.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You have two more questions, surprise. No. Last one, and it goes back to, again, it may be a part of implementation, but part of the wording on the contract states that, some of the fields will be available to the community after 4 o'clock. I think the tennis courts at the high school was after 5 o'clock. How do we plan on enforcing that? How do we, I think someone mentioned, we have a community member walking the fields at Goddard, but it's a school day and, we can see the kids and we can see a community member. How is that going to be enforced?
Well, right now, our administrators will contact those individuals and ask them nicely and kindly to step aside or step out or to return when the site is available or the field is available.
And how do we plan on notifying the community of this new, I don't think it's new because I think it's something that's been in place for a long time, but how do we communicate that, hey, we're going to be enforcing this maybe, and this is for the safety of our students?
Sure. It is actually not new. You're absolutely correct, board member. Members of the public are not supposed to be on the campus of the middle schools before 3:30 in the afternoon currently. There are open gates along the perimeter of the fence that are just open. So technically, anybody can walk in currently. They're not supposed to be there, and as the superintendent mentioned, school administrators typically engage. what we intend to do, there's actually signage at all of the entrances, but with a lot of signage, you kind of lose the information. So we do plan on updating all the signage. It will be bold, it will be big, it will be very clear that the public will not be able to access those fields before 4 o'clock moving forward. We also have been in conversations with the school district about closing some of those perimeter areas that are currently open, managing those gates throughout the day. So, letting the kids go onto the campuses if that's the way they get onto the school campuses, and then close it immediately as soon as school starts, and then reopen it back in the afternoon.
That's all I have. Thank you again for all the work that went into this. I appreciate it.
Monica, thank you. David, I know you have one other question to ask, and I would also say if there's anybody else that has anything else to ask before Gary and I, please just raise up your hand and the floor is yours. David?
Thank you. A fun opportunity. Does school detention still exist, for the person that can? My question is regarding the long-standing library agreement. And I'm just curious, is 1 hour per month enough?
For those of you who do not know, Janet Stone is going to speak, and she's director of that special gym that we all have, the library.
Yeah, thank you very
Thank you,
much.
Janet.
Yes, in fact, we are doing quite well with the allotment of hours that are currently under the MOU. It is largely participation in the library committee work, and that is not, we're not called upon to do that even every quarter. So, and the other kinds of research that we've been called upon to assist with are things we can do outside of the MOU's parameters so far. So it's more than generous enough at this time.
All right, David. Is there anybody else from either the council or board that has any question that may have emerged as a result of others? Let me just say just a couple things and maybe a question or two. Most of you probably don't know, but on a quarterly basis, there's a 2+2. So city has 2, district has 2, and we all meet. And we talk about just really down and dirty stuff, just operational stuff. And I think that it's safe to say it's because of that that we're here now. The honesty, the engagement, the willingness to both lean in and solve some of these things has really brought us here. And I just want to say thank you. We have another one that's coming up on February 22nd, I think. And so those kind of things occur, and the public really doesn't know that, but I think it's important that we talk about that. Part of why we're here too is we understand that money is shrinking. I think everybody knows that the budget that the state has is wherever it is, and schools sometimes have to take kind of the brunt end of some of that. And so we both want to make sure that we leverage the staff, the incredible staff that we both have, the resources that we have, the money that we have, because we're all about one thing, making sure that our kids are taught well, are kept safe, and have an experience that is really, really good. And so we're all here to just talk about that and to leverage that. And we all know that our jobs don't stop at 3 or 4, because there's Little League, there's soccer, there's football, there's cheer, there's all kinds of different things. And we want to do everything that we can to give our kids the best experience, because they're only kids once. And so that's important. Paul made a point, and I want to emphasize that the Saturday, we would invite and encourage each one of you to go down to Pompey Park. City has just wrapped up a very extensive amount of work where we put in new turf, that, artificial turf, in 362,000 square feet. And that's a lot of space. We spent $7 million to basically do that. It allows numerous sports events to happen just about every day, because the rain is not going to mess that turf up like it was when it was the pit. Now, you've had to live here for 30 years to know what the pit is. And it's a very special place in some of our hearts. And some of you are smiling because you have been there and you've frozen and you've gotten wet and your cars were muddy. Well, we don't have the pit now. We have Pompey Park, and it's an amazing place. So we have 4 multi-sport fields there. And where does the vision go? I don't know, Paul. I don't know, Gene. I'd like to see turf everywhere, but it costs a lot of money. But maybe by doing a little bit of what we're doing now will help us to squirrel some of that away. So one by one, park by park, we can see some of this stuff being done. So the only question that I have is, could you just kind of unpack again what effort has been made with all of the sports leagues to dialogue with them and get their input? I don't know if Andy wants to do that, or if John Aguirre wants to do that, or if Moises wants to do that, or who's going to join that.
Annie runs the meeting with all our league presidents monthly. So we're in contact with them all the time, and we work on schedules and stuff. So we'll be meeting with them even more now regarding the fee and what might be coming down, and then trying to schedule all that, because that becomes our workload. We'll be scheduling all that, the school district getting first priority of their sites, and then we come in afterwards. So we'll be working with them. We talk to them weekly for the most part, and that we use. We know our facilities have been our facilities for so long, so we know how it works and what their timeframes are. So it gives us that leeway there. It's just working on the fine tuning of when the school district has their intramural programs, and when we need to be off their sites or when we're coming back on their sites. So we'll work with them starting probably next week, getting all our schedules together and putting a master calendar together.
Great, thank you. With that, Gary, I'll give the last word to you before we seek a motion and vote.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I appreciate that. It's interesting. I've had the pleasure of serving Glendorans both on the city council and on the school board. And I've had experience in many of these arenas, both in law enforcement, as a school resource officer, and in, believe it or not, planning a few of those events that Mr. Lopez was talking about when it came to the event center, the pool, and the other things. And I have that rounded vision of what we wanted it to look like. I'm very grateful for the new team of Mr. Raymond and Mr. Lopez on the side of the city. Very grateful for our new team on the left side of me for the school board, and for the activity that has taken place this past year on the school board. There's been a lot of work, and it has been nonstop, and this is the sum product of all of that work. And I want to give credit to all of the people that were sitting up here that did that. I want to tell you, back in, I think it was from 98 or 99 to 2009, we did have those one-on-one meetings or two-on-two meetings with the school board, and they kind of went away for a little while. They're back now, right?
Right.
Sorry, it's all a long time. And when you say that the pool and the event center are old, you're making me feel old too, because Karen, I think we were on that council together that did that. But the vision, Karen, the vision was clear. Those were shared resources for our community. And at the time, for Mr. Lopez, I want you to know that the high school track was vibrant. Residents would be walking the track, and I'm committed to get that back, that vision back, that high school track. I mean, to me, athletics and academics are coterminous, and we have these award-winning schools, and I'm thinking about them, and I want to see them, just like you said. So we do have a track, and you're going to hear a lot of activity, especially about that track and field, trying to get that back in place sooner than later. And we've talked about that before. And for Mr. Slakey, who called in earlier also, I'm very committed, along with the rest of the board, to make sure the Williams facility is available to use. We don't have enough practice fields. Williams should be used, and we're going to do whatever it takes quickly to get that sewed up so the community likes the way it looks and our citizens can use those fields. I think that's very important. So one of the things that I really was interested in is I think it's very wise to meet and confer with the Glendora American Little League, National Little League, all of the different leagues we have, because many of them spend time, effort, and money doing the things that you're going to want time, effort, and money spent on. And to me, the vision of synergy and collaboration is clear. And Mr. Lopez, I know it is with you too. So I see this only getting better. So the people that work on the fields for you are going to be able to continue doing that. It's just going to be documented, managed. So if it cost us X to do it ourselves, maybe some of that X is diminished by the leagues doing that work for us. And I think that that's the intent of this. And I've met with the leagues over the years, and I think that it's a little scary to have a joint use agreement when they've been doing a lot of things. But I've been convinced by both our staff and the city staff that this is going to make more use than less use of the current fields. And again, Williams will be a part of that, and other sites that currently aren't being used, I think, will be a part of that. So I think that this is a critical document. I'm very proud of this. I intend on voting for it, loud and clear. And I'm just looking forward to the fact that the city has this expertise. They have public works people, they know how to lay asphalt, they know how to fix things, and they do that every day. And sometimes they would just stop. And then they'd say, okay, school district, you have to fix this. And it makes more sense to look at that together. And I think the indemnity is clear to me now. And I'm really looking forward to the event center getting more use. At one point in time, it was the vision that sometimes city council meetings would be there in the event center. When there was a big event, a big city council meeting, there was a whole plan on that. Remember, Karen, and they were going to have backdrops for.
Yeah, and I just wanted to clarify in case someone's trying to do the math. In 2001, you were on the council, but I was on the citizen committee. So you're the one doing the voting. We were doing the petitioning you. Yes. And so, yes, but you were correct. That was the vision of the citizen committee, was that it would be a place that could be used by everyone, whether it was arts, fine arts, drama, whatever it may be, that we were hoping and dreaming, as well as the pool.
I don't know if you're trying to point out I was incorrect or I'm older than you. One of those two things.
I think the latter, sir, that you were trying to make me older.
In any event, I'm very proud of our team, and I'm very excited about this new agreement. And that's all I have to say about that, sir.
All right. Well, thank you. And I just want to, echo that and just once again say thank you to our staff, and thank you to the colleagues that we share. We've come a long, long way in working together and leaning in, and I think this is going to be really, really good. So I've been instructed by our city attorney to do this, and if I do it wrong, I know that he will make sure I do it right. So this is what we're going to attempt to do. We're going to get a motion from the council and a second, and then Gary, you will attempt to do the same thing with your team. And then once we have those, then the city clerk will call a oral vote for all of us, and we will publicly declare our support or lack thereof of this. So
Each body needs to separately approve it, so it's a.
need to separately
Yeah.
approve it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So, all right,
I'll move recommendations 1 through 3.
okay. Second?
Seconded.
All right, thank you.
For the Glendora Unified School Board, can I have a motion, please? We have a motion and a second.
Okay, will our,
Just to confirm, that second was from, thank you.
so city
right.
clerk, will you call our,
At this time, I'd like to conduct an oral roll call for the Glendora City Council. Councilmember Alois,
Yes.
Councilmember Boyer,
Yes.
Councilmember Davis,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Friedendahl,
Yes.
and Mayor Thompson.
yes,
Okay, that motion carries 5-0. At this point, I will call an oral roll call for the Glendora Unified School District Board of Education. Board Member Lopez,
Yes.
Board Member Merkley,
Yes.
Board Member Reuter,
Yes.
Vice Chair Garcia,
Yes.
and President Clifford, and I apologize, that was Vice President. Okay, the motion carries 5-0.
My motion is yes.
all right, thank you. Well, okay, we have approved this. Staff from both sides will be working with the respective groups that this affects. And I believe that a commitment from all of us is to be open and listening and transparent in all of this. And I think if we do that, that it will work out well. I want to make sure that the leaders of our two groups can have a last word. So, Adam, I'll give it to you first, and then Dominic can close this out.
Really appreciate the action tonight. We said lots of times it's a large cumulative effort, and we're happy to be here. We look forward to coming back before the school board and the city council with an update on fees and our work on water meters and other parts of the agreement. So, not the last you'll hear from us, but this is just the start. So appreciate it, and have a good night, everyone.
Great. Dominic.
Thank you for the collaboration to make this document come to fruition. And thanks also for the continued support of the city and the Glendora Police Department. We had a recent event at Glendora High School prior to the winter break. The coordination of Glendora Police Department, its captains, one of which is here in attendance this evening. We thank them very much for their support and the coordination of the LA County Sheriff's Department in that event and assisting us throughout. We have also rebooted our articulation meetings with the Glendora Police Department to be held quarterly, starting in the month of February. We will have another one in the month of April, and then we will schedule 4 next year, for the next school year. Thanks again.
And the final word is cheers. We would have the real stuff, but that's not allowed by state law. So with that, I will adjourn this meeting at 6:18.